In 1387, the city of Isfahan in Persia was one of the most cultured, prosperous, and architecturally distinguished cities in the Islamic world. It had surrendered peacefully to the advancing army at its gates. It had been treated with mercy. Then it made a mistake. It revolted against the new ruler's tax collectors, killing them along with the soldiers stationed in the city. And the response was one of the most systematically documented acts of mass killing in the medieval record. An eyewitness, someone who was present, who counted, recorded that the soldiers built 28 towers throughout the city, each constructed from approximately 1,500 human heads. Between 70,000 and 200,000 people were killed. The sources disagree on the precise number, but they do agree on the towers. What makes this story genuinely strange, beyond the towers, beyond the scale, is that this same man, using artisans and architects forcibly transported from the cities he destroyed, built Samarkand into one of the most beautiful cities in the medieval world. The pyramids of skulls and the jeweled mosaics of the Guri Amir mausoleum were products of the same mind and the same campaign. That is the story I want to tell you today. In this video you will find out first, who Timur was, what he actually conquered, and what the sources agree on about the scale of his violence. Second, how the skull towers worked, the eyewitness accounts, the specific documented instances, and what modern historians say about why he used this particular method. And third, the paradox that defines his legacy, the conqueror who killed an estimated 5% of the world's population in the 14th century, and who also presided over one of the great renaissances in Islamic art and architecture. Both things are true. Understanding how requires looking at both. Timur, known in the West as Tamerlane, a corruption of Timuri Lang meaning Timur the Lame, was born in what is now Uzbekistan in the 1320s or 1330s. The exact date is uncertain. He died in 1405. He was not a descendant of Genghis Khan by blood, though he claimed legitimacy through a marriage alliance to a descendant of the Mongol dynasty. He rose to control the Western Chagatai Khanate by 1370 through military ability and political maneuver. Historian Beatrice Forbes Manns, in her 1989 scholarly biography, The Rise and Rule of Tamerlane, published by Cambridge University Press, the definitive academic account of his life, describes Timur as one of the most formidable military leaders and tacticians in history. That assessment is not controversial among specialists. By the standards of his era, he was extraordinary. His military campaigns took him from the steppes of Central Asia to India, from the Caucasus to the Eastern Mediterranean. He defeated the Golden Horde, the Mamluk Sultanate, the Delhi Sultanate, and, at the Battle of Ankara in 1402, the rising Ottoman Empire, capturing Sultan Bayezid I in the process. He spoke several languages, surrounded himself with scholars and poets, and conducted diplomatic correspondence with European rulers, including Henry III of Castile and Henry IV of England, correspondence that survives. He was not an uneducated barbarian. He was a highly capable ruler who understood precisely what he was doing and why. That understanding is exactly what makes the skull towers so disturbing. Isfahan, in what is now Iran, surrendered to Timur in 1387 without resistance. In keeping with his standard practice with surrendering cities, he treated its population with relative mercy. A garrison was installed, taxes were imposed. The garrison, the tax collectors and soldiers installed by Timur, was subsequently killed by the city's population in revolt. Timur's response was immediate and total. He ordered the massacre of the city's citizens. The death toll recorded in the sources ranges from approximately 70,000 to between 100,000 and 200,000. These are estimates derived from medieval sources. They represent the upper range of what contemporaries believed had occurred. The eyewitness account cited across multiple scholarly sources records more than 28 towers constructed of approximately 1,500 heads each. That eyewitness was present. He counted. Isfahan was not the only city where Timur built towers of heads. It was the most documented instance of a systematic practice that historians now recognize as a deliberate strategic tool, not random cruelty, but calculated terror. And the difference between those two things is the heart of what makes Timur's story unlike anything else in the medieval record. The skull towers at Isfahan are the most documented instance, but the same practice occurred at multiple locations across Timur's campaigns. At Baghdad in 1401, sources record 90,000 heads, arranged into 120 towers. At Delhi in 1398, one Muslim chronicler wrote that high towers were built with the heads of Hindus, and their bodies became food for beasts and birds. At Sivas, Tikrit, Aleppo and Damascus, similar structures were recorded by contemporaries. These were not chaotic piles of bones. These were carefully structured constructions, symmetrical, imposing and unmistakably intentional. They were monuments of annihilation, meant to endure. The strategic logic was explicit. Timur understood the towers as a way of preventing further resistance. The calculation was that the visible, permanent record of what had happened to one resisting city would deter other cities from doing the same. Mans describes this as a systematic use of terror against towns, an integral element of Tamerlane's strategic thinking, which he understood as preventing bloodshed by discouraging resistance. That phrase is worth sitting with for a moment, preventing bloodshed by demonstrating its costs. Whether or not that calculation was correct is a question the historical record cannot fully answer. What it can tell us is that cities which surrendered were, in general, not destroyed. Cities which resisted were. The policy was legible, consistent, and terrible. And the people in every city that heard about Isfahan faced the same choice. The total death toll attributable to Timur's campaigns is estimated by historians at approximately 17 million people, roughly 5% of the world's total population in the 14th century. To understand the scale of that figure, 5% of today's world population would be around 400 million people. The estimate is drawn from demographic research cited across multiple historical analyses of his campaigns. At Sistan, in what is now Afghanistan, a contemporaneous source records that approximately 2,000 people were incorporated alive into a mortar of clay to form the foundation of a tower. At Delhi in 1398, the city did not recover from the invasion for a century. These are the accounts that survive. Scholars note that medieval death toll figures carry inherent uncertainty. Chroniclers sometimes overstated numbers, and the populations of medieval cities are themselves difficult to establish. What cannot be doubted is the order of magnitude. The contemporary sources, now including sources sympathetic to Timur, describe destruction on a scale that transformed the geopolitics of the medieval world. The Spanish diplomat Ruy González de Clavijo visited Timur's court in 1404 as an ambassador from Henry III of Castile. His account is one of the very few first-hand European descriptions of Timur and his capital. He describes Samarkand in terms of extraordinary wealth, sophisticated architecture, and courtly culture. He also describes the skull towers at the city's entrance, both things in the same account by the same eyewitness. Two more things to cover, including the part of Timur's story that almost no Western account includes, what he built and why that complicates everything. If you like it so far, subscribe and like the video. Samarkand, Timur's capital in what is now Uzbekistan, was transformed during his reign into one of the architectural jewels of the medieval world. The Gur-e-Amir mausoleum, where Timur is buried and which still stands today, the Shah-i-Zinda necropolis, the Bibi-Khanim mosque. These are works of extraordinary sophistication, covered in the glazed tilework and geometric decoration of the highest Islamic artistic tradition. The artisans who built these structures were, in many cases, forcibly transported from the cities Timur had conquered. Architects from Isfahan, craftsmen from Damascus, scholars from Delhi. The destruction of those cities' populations was accompanied by the deliberate preservation of their most skilled inhabitants. They were brought to Samarkand and put to work. This was not accidental. It was policy applied from early in his campaigns. Timur made specific provision for the preservation of artisans, scholars, and craftsmen in cities that would otherwise be destroyed. The skill base he assembled through conquest became the material of the Timurid Renaissance, a flowering of art, architecture, and scholarship that his successors extended, and that contributed, through its influence on the Ottoman and Mughal courts, to the broader development of Islamic civilization. Timur's grandson, Ulugh Beg, built an observatory in Samarkand that produced astronomical tables of remarkable accuracy for the period. These were based on observations made possible by the scientific and scholarly infrastructure Timur had forcibly assembled from across the conquered world. When Soviet archaeologists opened Timur's tomb in the Gur-e-Amir in 1941, they found skeletal remains consistent with the historical descriptions of him, a man of above-average height with injury-related bone deformations in the right leg and right hand. Forensic analysis confirmed that his hair had been red. He was buried in jade. The inscription above his grave reads, "Were I alive, the world would tremble." Here is the full picture that emerges from the historical sources. Timur was one of the most militarily capable commanders in human history, operating in a political and cultural context in which extreme violence against resisting populations was not an anomaly, but a documented feature of Central Asian and Mongol military tradition that he inherited, systematized, and applied with calculation. The skull towers were real. The eyewitness accounts are the most contemporaneous documentation we have of his campaigns, and they are consistent across multiple sites and multiple sources. The death toll estimates are uncertain in their precision, but not in their order of magnitude. Something on the scale of millions of deaths occurred. 5% of the world's population is the figure historians work with. The Timurid Renaissance was also real. The mosaics of Samarkand survive. Ulugh Beg's astronomical work survives. The manuscripts Timur's court assembled, many now held in the great collections of Istanbul and St. Petersburg, survive. The culture he built from the human material of conquest was genuine. These two things are not in contradiction. They are both products of the same understanding, that skill was valuable and that those who could not resist were not worth destroying. The skull towers were for those who chose resistance. The workshops of Samarkand were for those who did not. The policy was consistent. Its results were, simultaneously, some of the most beautiful architecture in the medieval world and some of its worst documented atrocities. Historians have struggled with Timur's legacy in ways they haven't had to struggle with most medieval conquerors. The problem is the combination. The violence is too documented and too extreme to minimize. The cultural achievement is too genuine and too significant to dismiss. What the skull towers tell us when you look at them as historians who have studied them most carefully describe them is not madness or irrationality. They were a deliberate tool, applied with the specific intention of reducing further violence by demonstrating its costs. Timur had, as biographer Justin Morozzi writes, a legible if horrifying policy. The 70,000 people of Isfahan who died in 1387 do not have individual records. The artisans brought to Samarkand left their work, which still stands. What the historical record preserves of Timur's campaigns is the architecture and the atrocity. Both are real, neither erases the other. If you like this video, subscribe and leave a like, and comment what you want to see next.